Well, unfortunately, not everybody agreed with that, including some of the early male astronauts. And the reason given was, and think about the time frame, we're talking in the 1960s, they were worried that if something happened, if one of the space vehicles didn't return, if there was an explosion, just something was to go wrong. And if there was a woman on board, they felt that the American public's reaction would be more severe and would want to stop the program and be was hurt. Anyway, that was part of the rationale. That the 13 women were basically sent home saying, thank you very much, we don't have a place right now in the space program. But I'll come back to that story in a little bit later. In the 1970s, the first woman was hired by a major airline. Her name was Emily Howell, now Emily Howell Warner, and she was hired back in 1973 by Frontier Airlines. She had been interviewing for 6 years in a variety of aviation airline companies trying to get hired. And the kind of ironic thing is she was an instructor. She had about close to 6,000 hours of flying time. She was actually signing off pilots, her students, who then became airline pilots, and she's like, well, wait a minute, I'm training them, they're getting the jobs. Well, finally, Frontier decided to bring her on board, and 6 months later, 2 other airlines said, oh, we want to hire women too. So American Airlines and Eastern Airlines also hired their first women pilots that same year. One of them told a story. I had a chance to hear the lady who was hired by Eastern in a talk one day, and she said, yes, they did hire us, but we had some different rules we had to abide by at the time, back in, this is early 70s. We were told we were not to wear any makeup. And we were not to put PA announcement over the loudspeaker, because they were afraid that the passengers in the back, hearing a woman's, I want off this airplane. And they were told that they could not have long hair. If they did have long hair, they were supposed to tie it up, hold it up, and keep their flight hat on anytime they were in the airport area where passengers could see them, or on the airplane, at least the door was open. People, think about this. If you're a passenger and you're going up the jetway and you step on board the airplane, which way do you turn to get to your seat? To the right. How many of you, be honest, take a quick peek to the left to see who's sitting up, even though you probably don't know who it is? Right. So they were afraid, again, this is the early 70s, people looking in there, if they saw the long hair, they would know it was a woman pilot. And this did happen occasionally. People say, I don't want to fly on this airplane, I'm going to get off. So a lot of things, first time, first experience. Now, I didn't tell you that back in the 1920s, when that first all race was happening, a well-known radio commentator heard about the race, and he was talking about it on a show one evening, and he thought this was a great thing, but he nicknamed it the Powder Puff Derby, because he said, as the ladies were coming in to land, before they took get out their compact, so refer to, and still some people call it the Powder Puff Derby. In the 1970s, when these lady airline pilots were hired, their uniform, now if you go to the National Museum, one of the things on display are a series of airlines in this glass display case on mannequins, different companies, different years, so you can see the differences. Well, Emily's was in there for several years, and hers, if you look, looks very similar. It's the jacket and the pants and the white shirt and the hat. But if you look a little closer, you'll notice that on her jacket, there were no pockets. They were afraid she'd put lipstick or a powder, compact or something in there, I guess. And so no makeup. So Powder Puff was still with us, I guess, in the early 70s. Well, moving into then the 1980s with the Space Shuttle program, it was at this time that NASA did hire 6, and I think it was 1982, and another 2 in 1983, lady astronauts who then went through the training. Some of them you may recognize the names: Sally Ride, Bonnie Dunbar, Kathy Sullivan. I shouldn't start naming names because I won't remember all of them. Anyway, there were 8. Just saw two of them at an event in Oshkosh, Wisconsin last week. So they were on the space program, and the first time a woman actually was the commander on the space shuttle was when Eileen Collins served as space shuttle commander back in 1995. And what was so cool, it was a night launch, and I happened to be there for the ceremonies. 12 of the Mercury 13 ladies who from back in the 60s wanted a chance to go into space. They were so excited for Eileen that she was going to be the first woman pilot, commander of a space shuttle. They were there for the night launch, and they were cheering her on. So that was a wonderful event to be a part of. 1990s, what's happening? Well, from a personal standpoint, I would finish school. I was a flight instructor, commercial pilot, had a lot of flight hours, was doing a lot of flight training. I'd gone back to school. I decided I wanted to teach aviation at a university, and I had an undergraduate and a master's degree, and as I was looking to be hired, they said, well, you're going to need a doctorate. So back to school, got the doctorate, and one of the things I did on my dissertation, I was doing my study, I researched at the time, this is actually 1985, I'm working on a dissertation, sent a study survey out to the 425 colleges and universities around the United States that are offering aviation programs. And I was asking things like, what kind of aviation degrees are you offering? What kind of qualifications do you require for your faculty in terms of flight qualifications or engineering degrees or rating certificates? What do you require for somebody, assistant professor, full professor, tenure, all this kind of stuff. My last question was, are you currently looking for any aviation faculty members? And if so, what are the requirements for the current position? As I came back in, turned around and mailed out my resume. I thought I might be interested in going to teach, and got my first job at Georgia State University in Atlanta. But anyway, I digress. Okay, early 1990s. I'm now teaching at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I was on the Daytona Beach campus for a few years. I was out in the Prescott campus as an associate dean. And one of the things that in this time frame, late 80s and now 1990, the school was all aviation and engineering. Everybody there, the only degrees they offer are aviation and engineering. About 94% of the students were men and about 6% were women. Faculty was 98% men, about 2% women. But what we were finding out is the women would come, they would do well, but we found that the retention rate was not as high. Even though the grades were fine, they were leaving at a higher rate. So we started doing some exit interviews, trying to find out why this was happening. A percentage of them who were saying, I'm not sure this is really for me. We're the only woman student in a particular class, maybe one of only two, so they weren't sure this was an industry, a career to get into. So that sparked the idea to hold in March, in conjunction with Women's History Month, a conference called Women in Aviation. So about 150 people came to that first event, and we had some aeronautical engineers, we had a lady astronaut, one of the WASP were there, we had some Airline pilots from United, Gina Yeager, who just a few years before that had flown around the world nonstop in aircraft with Dick Rutan. 150 people, day and a half conference. Well, when the conference was over, I don't know about this particular event, but when the conferences are over, typically people are heading home. They're going to the airport, they're flying home, they're getting in their car, they're driving home. But people at that first conference were hanging around in the hallways, and they were talking, and they say, this was so nice to come to an aviation-centered convention or conference that had mostly women. There were men there also. It was about 85–15% of that at that first conference. It was so nice to come and interact with other women in aviation, because not just the students weren't seeing each other, but women out in the field weren't seeing each other. It was a nice opportunity for them. And somebody said, you got to do this again. It was a good idea to do it again. Well, as it so happened, this summer I accepted a position as Dean and Vice President with Parks College, which is an aviation engineering school affiliated with St. Louis University. So in March of that year, put on a similar conference, second annual Women Aviation Conference. Now we had 250 people who attended. And the other thing that was kind of unique, yes, it was women in aviation, said there were men and women. The other thing that was happening, now you go to you're going to everybody here is focused on a mission to Mars. You might go to the Airline Pilots Convention. Everybody's in the airline business. Maybe you go to an air traffic controllers convention. Aircraft. These different conventions, and they're very niche focused. This one's a lot broader based. Again, we have people who are engineering, we have people who are in avionics, pilots, they're mechanics, traffic controllers, they're aircraft designers, they're teachers, they're writers. It's a mix of people from the aviation industry. They're in the airlines, they're business aviation, general aviation, military. Military component is growing, and it's becoming more and more international. Well, the conferences kept growing. After about 5 years, we had about 500 people attending, and people started to ask, well, it's nice to come to this conference once a year and interact and so forth, but we have to wait till the next year. How do we join the organization? I don't know. There is not one. It's an annual conference that the university is putting on. So, successful, well, we'll try, so a nonprofit rest and all those good things, and at the next year's conference we announced now an organization called Women in Aviation International. And now I'll jump ahead. We now have 8,000 members. The annual convention has approximately 3,000 attendees. We usually have about 200 exhibitors. But one of our best success stories, and what I wanted to be sure I mentioned today, that first year we became an organization, one of the goals was we wanted to help young people who wanted to go into aviation or space career fields. What's one of the best ways we could do that is to have a scholarship program. So at that first year, we said, all right, well, how are we going to raise some money? It's just something really simple. We had a table, we sold raffle tickets, $1 a chance, 6 for $5. We raised a little over $1,000. So we gave out 2 $500 scholarships. We were happy, it was a start. Northwest Airlines came up to us afterwards and said, we want to help your program, scholarship program for next year. You're coming to Minneapolis, you want to kind of be the host, sponsor, so we're going to provide a scholarship. And I'm thinking, hey, great, another $500, maybe another $1,000. I said, oh, no. We want to give away a type rating. A type rating. So that's training in a simulator for a large airplane. Which airplane? Any airplane we fly. All right. So what are the requirements? So the minimum requirements the person would have to have. We put the information out, got the applications in. At the luncheon during the conference that year in 1996, announced the winner. She was screaming all the way up to the front. She hugged the guy from Northwest Airlines, who was about 7 feet tall, I think. And she was all excited. He said, all right, young lady, well, you won the scholarship, but you have to tell us which airplane you want to get your type rating in. 747. She came back. Largest airplane they had. He said, all right. Did very well. They've continued to be one of our scholarship sponsors and others. The scholarship program this year, our event was in Orlando. We gave away 62 individual scholarships. The total amount was $787,000. Again, there were engineering scholarships, management, maintenance, a lot of flight, everything from a recreational sport pilot certificate, private pilot instrument ratings, CFI, up through and including still the big type ratings. To date, total from that 1996 through this year, we've awarded over $6.5 million in scholarships. And I mean, it's just to us amazing the support that we receive. We've had young people who now career who've come back and said, hey, I want to start a scholarship to help somebody. So we have some like $1,000, $2,000 scholarships from people who were previous winners maybe 10 years ago now or more. So our next conference is actually going to be out in Reno, and it's just been amazing to see again how many women are in aviation careers, and whether it's whatever area you're talking about, and to see their enthusiasm to encourage other young people, boys and girls. Oh, I should mention, we have a chapter program too. We have 71 chapters around the world, and one of the key items that every chapter is required to have 2 activities a year, and one of those is an educational outreach activity. Whether it's going to a high school or community college and talking about careers in aviation and space, whether it's just going into with a school group and talking to them about flight, what that means. But every chapter has a mission, if you will, to go out and talk to young people about aviation, space, and or careers. So I think I've got 5 minutes left, so I want to leave a little time for, okay, for some questions and answers, or the questions, maybe I'll have an answer. Yes, sir.
Does Reno still have that race around the pylons yet?
Reno, yes. In fact, Reno air races are coming in September.
That's where
In Reno. That's the one around the pylon. That stays at the same location every year. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You should be the PR person for the Mars Society.
Oh.
That's a serious suggestion, because there's but they someone you.
I have a full-time job right now, but thank you.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
you could find a clone or something.
Oh, I see. All right.
About the scholarships,
yes.
Are there any like full scholarships to college for like some a young lady who wants to pursue an aeronautical degree? Or
Which we have had a couple like that where they'll do a 4-year college and you have to keep a certain grade point average and so forth. But the companies now that we're doing that, they kind of backed off of doing the full 4-year commitment. But you can reapply. And some of the companies now have added paid internships. So the student in the summer can do an internship. And ICAO, in fact, this year added 5 internships in all different areas of aviation, and one or two were engineering related. ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. Some of them were based in Montreal, which is where their headquarters